Thank you, everybody, to be here. I'm happy to see it's quite busy. Even at 3:30 p.m., I see who's really passionate about the topics. And I thank you because it is a subject that concerns everybody. And beyond that, beyond cyber aspect, it's concerning all citizens. Because even though I'm supposed to have the elite of the digital world, everyone here gives their own identity to a lot of facilities. And when there's a cyber attack and your data is online, generally things, when they happen, you get a notification from the CNI. But now, once the data is broadcast, what do we do? The question is, the cyber criminals know exactly what they're going to do, and are you allowed to go get your data back? Do you have a public actor that will actually go out of his way to look for this data? And there are some people that will go look in those data that are illegal, and we'll see that the limits are not very clear. And today we have 4 experts that do face those data leakages. So let's start with Odile. Hello, Elodie Dutil, Deputy Director, Cybersecurity for the Caisse de Dépôt. I'm here to give you some feedback on the exploitation of personal data. Hello, Gaston Gautreau-Rouge. I am working with everything that has to do with the financial aspect, the police, gendarmerie, etc. Hello. Pierre Craponne, lawyer and trainer at Choisissez Associés. We manage the data department. I have the legal aspect as well as the insurance aspect. I'm also responsible for Conseil Cornut that gives a consulting on cybersecurity. Hello. Baptiste Robert. I was starting being a hacker. I created 4 years ago Predictalab, where we create everyday tools for open source intelligence, and we offer services. The question today is fundamental for the realization of products, but also our ability to innovate on the global span. Thank you, everybody. I will get back to the introduction that I started, and I feel actually very lucky to have a representative of the CNIL. Gaston, I'm actually talking to you today in your job. Do you estimate that it became very fuzzy? We do not see what the limits are of those data leakages. Thank you for your question, Bogdan. To put back in context, to say something, we are in a time where digitalization is very important, remote working, hyperconnectivity, and we live in a world where the company's network we are open because we do work from home, and the networking is very open. So to take back, like the cybersecurity images, we are no longer, yes, we are in open systems. And as you said, we have organized crime that is more and more professional. However, we have seen that recently, recent data violations, we have things that are happening at a personal level, and we have new tools that are able to access this data with, lots of repercussions on the people that are concerned. So what I think is, first is to take into account the reality of this. There's a lot of companies, even as a user, as a client, as a citizen, we have an approach that considers the cybersecurity not so linked to our company issues. And we feel that we will not be impacted on a personal level. But I think this is something that we need to go beyond, because we need to be aware that we can have a very big impact on our lives if this happens to us. We are all concerned. And doing cybersecurity a national cause is essential. That way we can have an approach that is more realistic and more broad around those challenges. So I think today it is not so much about being afraid. It's just to like realize, what is actually happening and how to react. And we see that the maturity of companies evolves, and they do start to take into account more into detail the threat, because the threat is evolving. So if I'm not mistaken, the CNIL put online guidelines. Do those guidelines have a legal aspect for all of these? Well, there are different elements. There's the publication, for example, at the end of April, of the guidelines about reusing data, personal data. This is the first element that's very important for the open source intelligence, for the research. It's this white paper will put into perspective the opening, so open data, reusing data. And then we have publications around the rife, internet research, which is the topic of this roundtable that we started working on 2022, and we attempted on having the creation of a framework around this, so that we can be able to limit the impact of the people that are concerned and limit the tools, so that the usage is intelligent and can, in case of violation, can act on those threats. Pierre, you said that they're not. It's not very often that we have lawyers, and it's surprising because we do face a lot of legal aspects. So, what does the law say today? So what is the framework which you work? Well, I actually try not to read all of the rules and the legal books, but we have 4 articles that put a frame around those instances. So 3 articles from the Godefroy law, 323.123, that claim that there will be some repercussions, legal repercussions, if you breach data, if you have internet leakage, if you try to introduce data, modified data. So we target something that is in the terms of automated data access. And then we have another article that will have corrective actions if you go into personal data. Also, to answer your question, what does the law say? It doesn't say much, but then we have to reattach ourselves to different concepts. So it would be like identity theft or resell of concealment offense. So this is pretty new because, they are not very well adapted. The text is pretty limited, and we try to force a little bit so that we can actually integrate, this subject. And when we get in the court of law, we need to prove that even though there was no infraction, there was, a notion of personal data, and there are some cases where you have some resale of those data, but it's, quite complicated. The legal aspect does not allow us to have like a good visibility on those problematics. And now on the usage of those data that were obtained in a criminal way, we have some corrective actions on the legal side. So if there's a client that comes to see me, they will get some money back, right? But this is more in private area. So if we can prove that there was some data that was obtained in a wrongful way, this is where we would attach our attention and focus, how we can actually get some retribution. Then we need to prove that the adversary received some data in a criminal way, they were potentially modified, or were proved that they were the correct data and all those elements, and we can actually hire some experts. But it goes hand in hand with what we will go into later. But the expert is more on the technical side. They will try to explain to our clients the situation. The clients will not necessarily understand, and then they will transcribe to the lawyer what they understood, and then we need to give, the judge his version that is interpreted, and it's quite complicated. The translation from one and another is quite fuzzy, and it's not like black and white. It's not really helping us to reach our objective. So what should we be expecting on that legal framework? Well, we could say that the judge could handle the case, but it is not the legal representative, sorry. If the law is too complicated, there are few situations that can actually match this situation, this legal aspect. And in terms of retribution, it will be also difficult because there are interests that needs to be respected. And recent, the evolution of insurance, if you want to sue someone in case of a ransomware, it's just like a drop in the ocean. It's just the payment of the ransom requires you to file a lawsuit and then to declare to the CNIL the data violation, and in the end, do our clients win the case? They realize there's so much work they have to do, and we just lose their interest or their fight because we lose their trust, basically. Odile, at the Caisse de dépôt, you find some of those complicated situations where you have some partners or individuals that are facing themselves data leakage. Yes, so let me just explain the context. At the Caisse de dépôt, we manipulate sensitive data or very sensitive. So it will be either on the financial side, and we also social policies like retirements, and then under the governance of the government, I have to say that everyone here is concerned by this because we handle social security number, address, email, or physical address. So you understand that those data that are personal, we need to protect them. We do protect them, and we have a challenge on data leakage, and in order to avoid that data leakage, another challenge is when we have a data leakage, for example, the unemployment agency that we have. There's 43 million people that were concerned, and it's a span of 20 years, so we have very sensitive data, as I mentioned earlier. The question is, when we have this data, when the hacker has this data, what can he do with that data? So it's very simple. He can do anything. He can log in that website and have access to public affairs. For example, you have a fund where you can get some training, and they can just use your credentials and access training pretending to be you, and they will just you feel that we have a whole system that is implementing itself, and we have situations that are very complicated. There's some sort of rebound effect. And we have some data leakage from organizations we are not even linked. So as a legal aspect, you also have those challenges. Yes, to actually meet what Pierre was saying, there's like a lot of trials, and it's just like just a lot of cases, and it just takes a long time because there's too much to handle. And then the data that we, have are rather technical. How do you prove that an organism is fraudulent and is, working with criminals? So we look at IP addresses, and if the IP address corresponds, then we realize that there's going to be like a fraud scheme, as we say. But these data are rather difficult to apprehend. I understand that it is not the job of a legal worker. And so sometimes you'll have a verdict that can be very different from one another. So in Paris, you can have a resolution that would be very different from the one that you have in Montpellier, for example. So it's not black and white, but it can depend on, on the legal representative, and if he has some knowledge on the subject. Yes, and there's like a different judgment depending on the region. But it is true that there's a difficulty as a company to know what level of proof and the truthfulness of the proof. And internally, we have discussions to see if our proof is acceptable. Yeah, sometimes we do face some funny situation. We have a double problem. It's almost at the organizational level. The one is that there are just too many cases open on the legal aspect. So a judge will have very, very little time for each case, and that's just a reality. And this is our job as a lawyer, to convince them and to bring forward all of the proof for the case. But it's true that when we have complicated cases, very technical, for example, we have this limit that is complicated. Our case is about, for example, 130 pieces, and each document is 90 pages. We know that it's going to be difficult to convince the judge within 90 minutes. So this is part of our job. So that would be our first challenge, is the lack of time. Then there are some alternatives, but they have their own limits, because mediation, for example, is interesting when we have all of the participants that are present. But for example, if you have a hacker, he is not present and he will never be there because we'll never be able to find him. So we have to arbitrate between public organism, insurance company. We have to call for outside providers, and we look for solutions that sometimes have a good result, but is very expensive and can keep a confidentiality level that is rather acceptable. But, like when you do go trial, you have to kind of admit that your company was exposed. So it is something that is complicated, even for a small structure. The arbitration is rather it costs a lot of money. The second challenge is a lack of specialists. Not only the judges, but also a lack of lawyers that specialize in this, and a few clients that actually understand the problematics. They bring elements that can help us, but there's also lots of understanding. We can have, decisions rendered that are very different, as I said earlier, because our system in France is very different from the one in English-speaking countries. We have a different rule. And the way you present the issue will have a big impact on the verdict. The logic that I actually started talking about earlier is the finality of the issue. If you have a corrective action, you'll look for, a retribution. But it would be difficult to get to the objective of the client, and he will seldom get what he's lost. And this, we can only get retribution in the civil court, and you'll get maybe some money back, but we lack of maturity in this market, because they do not understand the prejudice that they will get. I mean, we understand that we will lose, and if we have insurance, we'll get back some of this, but the cost is very high. But if you lose customers, you will lose them forever. And if the company lost credibility, it's difficult to get back the trust. So these are the main points. As a cyber insurance worker, the big point is conformity. In order to anticipate the subject of data leakage and malicious usage is to anticipate those, and not only to think about the financial side.
Baptiste, I see that you came without any notes because you have a very clear opinion about this, and you have 3 days of thick of experience now, so you are very well inspired, and you even inspired this round table. I saw you very often discussing with companies that are concerned. So you work with OSINT, with data, but if I remember well, you refuse to work with data shared illegally on the web. Yeah, first of all, I wanted to thank you before answering. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here 3 days of thick. It's very tiring. It's very interesting, but you're starting from 6 a.m. It's not always the best time, so thank you very much, all of you, for being here. So yeah, the topic of data leakage, treating with the OSINT, open source intelligence. It's a real topic for all of us, for a lot of us. Like, say, Bogdan, around a drink, around a beer, we do know that we had some in these last 3 days. It is one of my favorite topics. Are we allowed? Should we? Can we treat this data leakage? This topic is very complex. We saw it through the different interventions. We have a legal framework, which is particular in France, not always adapted, as we said. First thing, I'm not a lawyer, but I have a good lawyer. He told me, it's very simple. Data leakage, it was stolen, literally. There were a hack from a website on any kind of service. So the fruit of this hack is stolen property. And if you trade from this stolen property, it has a name, resell. So you can play, of course. Maybe there is a tolerance, maybe no one is watching. But it will depend on your luck. I'm not that lucky, so I'm not going to play. And today, for a French company, Predictalab, we have a French company based in France with French interest. We are not allowed to use data leakage if you respect the law. It's not the choice that is done by everyone. Some are more public on this topic, but in OSINT domain and in general in threat intelligence and cyber, there are some companies that every day will use this data leakage within their system, within their service, advertising about it or not. And there is a real reason behind it. Data leakage, it's very useful in our jobs. And sometimes, maybe you were here on Tuesday. On Tuesday, at the OSINT day, we talked a lot about pivot. When there is an investigation, we will turn around, and then we find the one data that would help us to go beyond and go further in our investigation. This is what we call a pivot. And data leakage, most of the time, are very formidable pivots. Of course, we can not use it, but we will miss a lot. And our job is already very complicated. So the question is, and existing regulation to protect privacy are very important. However, we have a very particular mission. Some people and the authorities and intelligence service have a mission. It was provided to them, is to secure our country. We see it today with a different menace and threat level that is increasing. So we live in a hostile world. The world is hostile. The use of this data leakage can be very useful on a very concrete aspect. We're not thinking at the end we are stopping the bad guys, so maybe we can avoid very terrible events. So we do understand the question of individual freedom, privacy, but the question, which is also an industrial question, is if we don't, if I, French company, I am not allowed to do it, if as a French company with French values, who desire and build a company that is 100% based on ethic, want to protect and want to apply French values, if I don't, others will. No need to go very, very far, just go downstairs, and there are many foreign companies here with this data leakage. Foreign companies that will sell to the state, to state services. So the question is, okay, it's complicated. We have our culture, our value, and they are very important, and we have to make it we have to enforce it, and we cannot provide these keys to anyone without any control. We all agree on that. However, if we don't, others will. And when we are American, Israeli, Russian, we don't have the same values. I'm not saying that they are better or worse, not the question, no judgment, but we don't have the same culture, we don't have the same values, and we don't have the strategic interests and geopolitical interests. So when we have a French government with French companies that will use products that are not French, that will put data outside, we have a real challenge. And the whole question is how? What do we do? Should we go forward? Should we think, how could we produce tomorrow's product? How can we produce this very powerful French product that will allow us to have our French product that will help us for soft power? And if we manage to create a legal framework that will help small companies like mine to innovate, to catch up how late we have so much delay, maybe we will be able to create, maybe not champions, maybe not the beacon, the French beacon, but maybe we will be able to create companies that will have very effective products that we can export and make France shine abroad. And also to protect France. It's big words, I know, it's very poetic. I'm really feeling great on the end of it. But the question is here, it's very important. And if we'll finish on this, I often describe my job as this, climbing a mountain. On the one hand, we have to protect the privacy of our citizens. It is very important in France. But on the other side, we have to protect the security of the country. And for this, we need tools. And these tools are on this crest line that will protect the privacy of our citizen, but also will allow people who protect us every day to do their job and to do it correctly, without abusing it, and with tools that embed our culture, our value. And it is very important. If we don't go through this crest line, others will, with no problem. So the question is, do we want to go? Do we want to go all together? once again on this topic, we just let the others go and we just watch. I hope there are some politics here in the room. I think there is one in another room. Gaston Bastille just say there are some American companies or foreign companies. We can say, quote, all the countries, Israeli, Russian, Chinese, French, working with data. We don't know the origin. How at the CNIL do you work with it? What is the framework? Should we tell you? Do you take the initiative? Thank you, Baptiste. Thank you, Bogdan. Oh, yes, it's really interesting. It's not easy to answer in a few minutes because the stakes are very numerous and very different scope and responsibility. And the notion of IGDB is also to provide a context. So the first question is what type of company will implement this service? This is why we try to establish the OSINT in a very specific framework, trying to answer to the question despite the legal framework today, to allow the companies, due to data leakage, to use these tools in a very benevolent and smart way with a context for the companies with data they own. These data are also suspected to coming from a leakage. So we won't look for anything, not for things that doesn't concern us, but we will try to see if the data that we own as an entrepreneur are data from our client, from our users, that went in the wild following a leakage. So the context is very important. Second element, to answer to your question, Bogdan, is the will of the CNIL through a public consultation that was just launched around multi-factor authentication. That we started last year in the FIC with the compliance or security compliance of all systems. So the idea for us is to interact with the ecosystem and also for the user, can be private or public, to see what would be the stakes, to realize what is mandatory and to avoid any threat for the users, while still protecting the privacy, and to see how we could reinforce the security on a legal aspect for the companies, to allow them to deploy on a smart way solutions and to use them very smartly, very protective for the privacy, but also to try to, little by little, to shape the market in an approach that will be more positive, that will allow us to tackle this topic with this protection in mind. So all these elements that you mentioned is the way we deploy it, how we use it, because once again, OSINT is very broad. And the technology is very broad, but not alone. The pivot we use, the target we use, on which we are looking for information, it's very broad. And the end point is also very broad. So little by little, through different interaction with the ecosystem, on a technical aspect, but also for the responsible for treatment, also through different exchanges that we can have with a lot of stakeholders that are in charge or in different level of hierarchy and accountability on the different topics that you mentioned. The idea is to have a better vision and try on very specific perimeter to provide solutions and responses. But like Pierre said, the legal framework is very complicated. And sometimes rules conflict with each other. It's not easy to find a solution. So we try to have this approach based on the end result, which is very important for IGDB. And we have to keep it in mind when the end result is a security for a specific perimeter following data leakage. We won't analyze it in the same way when it's a very broad question to record everything and see later if there are any data that can be exploited or used without any legitimacy, without any end result in mind. So it changed completely the stakes. So to finish, I would like to say that we have this need to be well-grounded and do realize what is the context, because we have a very complicated political context, that the least we can say. And also to understand the different legal framework, but also the aspect for the job, for the companies, depending on the ecosystem, and how can we provide solutions. And solutions, of course, are not easy. The work is lasting so long. We wish our responses were faster, but at least we have these exchanges, and they're very important for us at the ecosystem level, and they help us to go forward to have a better position around these security solutions.
Pierre, did you face some customers that did not have this sense of reality, or maybe, were like kind of borderline? Well, we had some clients that were not very honest. Of course, we had some. This is something that we learn in school. Your worst enemy is your client. And even though we are supposed to defend them, we actually need to know them, the way they work. And even if it is not entirely a client that is 100%, pure. They're not going to tell you, oh, I've done this that was unlawful. So I wanted to go back to a subject. I just wanted to bounce back on what was saying Baptiste, the fact that, you take your chance once you took realization and, the challenges and the stakes, is to accept your own risk, or to put it on your insurance company. But in order to handle your risk, you have to know your risk and be aware of that risk. And this is where it hurts, right? Because the typology of clients that are confronted to the subjects of data leakage or usage of data that were obtained in a wrongful way, the typology is what I've identified as companies that are not, really fully aware of the risks that they are taking, or the risks that can actually expose their company. A few months ago, I've had a client that that buys leads, and I have colleagues that called me and said that all of his data was on the dark web. So I asked him questions about his security level, and he had no security levels. He had installed his server, and there was no security installed. And I actually said, wow, you handled it, for 2 weeks, which is pretty extraordinary. You have to actually call the CNIL and notify the authorities. And he said, oh, it's not really easy for me because I have a few clients I need to help. Can we do it in 3-4 months? But no, the RGPD says you have 72 hours to work on that. So I was actually telling him that it was urgent, that he needed to take those actions, and it's whether you do it or not, but accept the risk, because the risk is very heavy. And this is the first part where they are not aware of the risk, and that the data of their clients could be open access, even in an unlawful way. And then there's another part, that people that are not aware of the repercussion. You have to you're legally bound to do a declaration to the CNIL, because your clients, have their data exposed, and those clients will actually ask for retribution. It could be €1, symbolic euro, for 1 million people. So that would be 100 million euros. Without, counting, all of your colleagues, the people you work with, and all of those elements, a lot of those people do not realize how important it is. So we are working in a very interesting field for that. On top of that, you have other companies that have a target that is a bit more sensible, but they are too focused on, their achievements and innovation. So when you talk to them about security, operational security, technical security, legal security, when you start talking about this, some of them say, oh yeah, I'm actually really comfortable with this subject. I have this contract, but the contract, they haven't really understood what they signed, and they have all the responsibility, and it limits the responsibility and the accountability of some workers that they hired. And so, it's rather complicated to have them understand. Also for like insurance company or insurance contract, like, oh yeah, I'm covered in case of a cyber attack. But the question is, how much will you be covered? And maybe you'll have 10% of your prejudice. And this is something that are not aware of. So we talk a lot about security, cybersecurity, and all of those companies that are innovative. Those small companies, their real challenge is cybersecurity, because if they are not secure, how can they secure their clients? However, the legal aspect is always forgotten. And that's exactly what happens. It's insecurity, legal insecurity. If you have a contract that does not have a framework around it, you have a complete legal insecurity, pretty much. So these are elements that are very important for those companies. And we also have clients that are half conscious, half aware, that are in between those two that I described. They know that the data that they use maybe were not obtained in a lawful way, so they kind of have a blind spot and they just ignore the risk control. And it's not a random affair, So what kind of client am I as a hacker? Well, you are not my client, sir. Well, maybe not yet. Odile, do you have, about all of those cases that were evoked, do you try to bring awareness to those individuals? Well, yes, of course. At the Caisse de Dépôt, we are responsible of the processing. When we have data leakage, which happens, we have to we do the declaration to the CNIL. The challenge is to bring awareness to other collaborators with the sensitive data. How do you send data to a lawyer if you need to do so, and what are the conditions and what level of sensitivity? So the awareness is started in this way. So you have information and we say, okay, so it's either public or it's secret, and when it is secret, you cannot just send that information. You need to apply some measures like encryption, send your folders with an encrypted way. And we also have a system like EDLP to prevent data leakage. So we don't block traffic, but we have a alerting system. So you have a traffic that is recognized, but we put conditions, and this is how we work. So if we can have data that's anonymous, that is even better, but that will also depend on the situation. And then we have another part, which is collaborators awareness. They are also citizens. So because they're citizens, all best practices are implemented inside the company. Each time we do sessions and awareness session, we remind them that those good practices can be applied in your private life, and please do so. So when we have data leakage, so the first thing you do is change your password, right? So often we have the same password for many different things. So we try to have this awareness of the citizen that is the collaborator at the Caisse de Dépôt. And we hope that maybe they will talk about this with their family and friends. And we would like to have awareness sessions like we had for the car security, right? it would be nice to have this kind of awareness. So there's a website online on the government that triggered a website. You can actually go online and see how, to be more secure. It's about an hour and a half of knowledge. So there is some sort of awareness that is, well, actually, I think it's a great idea. Like, personally, I think it's something that we would like to have. So this is how we work, both on the data leakage awareness and also on collaborators awareness. Baptiste, I see that you want to say something. Maybe you can have a final word. You were saying about talking about a revolution, a new framework, a new way of thinking on the higher part. Is it a fight that is already lost, or because you were talking about different phases and maybe France? In France, we are all confronted to countries that can just do whatever they want, companies do whatever they want, and will never have a really clear frame. Well, is the battle lost? I want to say no, otherwise we wouldn't be here. I mean, I hope it is not already lost, because there are things that are going forward. We talked about awareness. We talk about a specific framework on a final aspect and an approach that we want to reach at the CNIL. We see that the legal frameworks is, like, there's questions, right? We used to not ask questions. So now the good thing is we are going forward, we are thinking, and is the battle difficult? Absolutely. What is for sure is that we live in a world is to, in the cyber, there is no frontier, there's no border. So we are asking ourselves questions like in France, in Europe, on the legal framework, but the field is global, is international, and we all have different rules. And on top of that, we have actors hegemonic that are sitting on tons of data. So we play with very few weapons, with rules that are different. And yes, it is difficult, but it doesn't mean that we don't have the power to change, to make things evolve. And we talked about awareness, and this is extremely important. But it's extremely long. It's been like 10 years that I participate in conferences, and we talk and repeat the same things. Things go forward, but it is very, very long, and we need to do it together, and we need to work together on those subjects. So will we be able to, have a frame around this? No, absolutely not. And if we try to have a very miniature focus point, we have states that are having an information warfare and will, for national aspects or international, for example, China, or, we can talk about Russia is creating its own sessions on internet. It's called RUNET, like Russia Internet. So we'll start, we have open internet, which will become distinctive internet, depending on the country you live in, will be monitored and surveilled. So the world we are going towards is more and more segmented. And we are an interests group, conflicts, national conflicts, international, with different dynamics that are very erratic. So will we be able to, have the European voice? Because the subject are not just European. The RGPD actually made things evolve. Like when we talk about data, people say, "Oh yeah, it is my data. I have rights." And RGPD, help with that. But the notion of I actually mentioned it around another roundtable. This notion of national cause. Data can also be used for something else. We need it, and we need to mobilize. And there's some people that use data leakage for a good reason, and it's okay. Maybe we'll be able to have, the general opinion kind of evolve. It's complicated. We go forward, and today the situation, and I say as an entrepreneur, the situation for companies in this sector is very complicated. If we do not want to take any risks, we talked about risk analysis or risk taking. If we don't want to take any risk, we cannot work. I mean, literally. In France, if you want to have a OSINT and use data leakage, you cannot work. Or you take a risk. It is complicated. It will bring you to situations that you didn't want to be in, and you'll lose time doing something else. But you have ecosystems where there's a lot of money that go elsewhere and is able to feed something that we don't have at home. And this is what is sad, is that today, innovation, it is not home. It's not at home. It's not in France. AI, we talk about it every day. And the OSINT is a real subject. But we're not allowed to touch the data. We're not allowed to use data leakage. We have to fill in so much paperwork. And we don't have time to create a PAI. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but there are so many rules and regulations that slowers the innovation. And we're all very intelligent people, so I think we'll get there. Well, actually, for question and answers, we'll need a half an hour for question and answers, but where to start? As a geopolitical point of view, all of the aspects, when you talk about Russia and Chinese internet, we have to create a distinction. There's state protection. You have to create a difference between the usage and the need. Second element on the transfer of responsibility and the awareness of the reality of those solutions. Today we see that we have business propositions, and there's the will to transfer the legal accountability to the client. This is starting, it's being developed, and it requires from the clients that are more and more aware of it and are willing to be, in a legal aspect and to bring forward and to progress. And I'm asking everyone to have a constructive point of view. We need to be able to exchange, work together, and have solutions that actually keep your data safe. And we need to, make the difference between, all of those aspects. The context today is not very clear, but the awareness that is not clear and the need for those technology, the evolution, and, the wrong usage of those tools, just triggers a lot of questions, and regulators are, working a lot on, what is right or wrong. And Baptiste, don't hesitate to talk about it together. I would be happy. Thank you, Gaston. I hope that we can talk about it. If the framework evolves, that we'll have the opportunity to talk about. Let's give a big round of applause to all the speakers today. And congratulations for those 3 days of the FIC. Do we have any questions? Okay, please, you can use the microphone. Thank you for all of your interventions. You actually talked, ma'am, about identity theft through, that unemployment website, the French website. I have questions. So the state, the government installs this for, people to find can log in, and is it going to be the case for the cyber criminals? What do you think about those new ways of logging in? 80% of those people that have their identity stolen, 80% of them, that are in debt. It's just like really exploding. Like, how does the state, make it easier for the people, to have this encryption of the data? I mean, we talk about awareness. We know it's going to take some time. Is it not more simple that the state, the government, ask all citizens, to go through some different tools that you already implemented to actually go faster? Because we know that this identity theft goes through there. It's a very complicated question. It just went all over the place. I'm sorry. As a citizen, how do you do to protect your ID when you want to rent an apartment? So personally, how do you do to protect your ID? Because you need to give it to rent an apartment. Okay, so first question I'll start answering. So indeed, we have a system, France Connect, that shows limits when we have data leakage. And for one of them being the unemployment website, but there's a lot of people that are subscribed on there. We have a CAPTCHA security system. We reinforce the authentication. It works better. But we have different ways to log in. You can go through the La Poste website. But of course, they will, we're not protected from identity theft. So does the government have the responsibility to force a method that is more complicated? I mean, that would be a question that we would need to have, around a real round table. I mean, yes, I agree. We need to make the authentication ways, more complicated. But, there's a lot of imagination for hackers. I will answer the ID question. I don't have an ID. It's been quite some time. But on the broader span, on the private life, and to have, protect your private life, I chose to be public. So to take, part into conferences on social media, it's part of my life for the past 10 years. So there's a lot of advantages. I mean, to meet people as interesting as you, and to exchange. But also there's some downsides in terms of private life. When you start talking publicly to defend some ideas and bring awareness, you just give up on a lot of your private life. Give you an example. There's some people that just came to my place. I have got some death threats. Last time I went to a concert, people took a picture of me and put it on Twitter. So it is part of subjects. I mean, we are living in, the beginning of France's cyber world. So I exchange with a lot of people that I didn't know. It's very interesting, but at the same time, to talk about those subjects means that you just give up on part of your private life. And I'm not a really good example in terms of protection of my own private life. However, if you want to protect your private life, you need to always be careful on the services that you use, on the data that you're being asked. Does this service need that data? Can you lie? I say it all the time, don't hesitate to lie. I mean, it sounds funny, but we always taught you to be honest because you had good parents and you shouldn't lie. But the truth is, on the internet, you can lie. You can lie on some things, There's an example I often use is you go to a store, a furniture store that is, trendy, and at the cash register, they ask for your zip code, and so you're going to answer, and you'll say the truth. But you don't have to say the truth. You don't have to give your postal code, your zip code, to sell you this cup. But it's a situation in which you will not lie because you think, before they give you this object, you have to answer that question. But protect your private life means also that you need to step back on those mundane things and mean that you don't have to be so quick on giving, information. Also, in your real life interaction, globally, this is what I say. Today, I don't have this luxury. I have different luxuries, but I don't have this one. So it's part of the game. Actually, she was talking about the ID card. There's a filigrane. I'm sorry, I cannot hear the question because the lady is not using a microphone. You have means on how to protect the transmission of your ID, and I've worked on this subject in India, for example. What is going to kill the system is the fact that you will have a new job. You're going to rent, an apartment. You'll make a copy of your ID, and, they're going to copy, at a hotel, and you have no idea how long they will keep that copy of your ID, how they protect them. It can be on an iPad, on the computer, like maybe physical copies, just going to hang out there on the counter. So today, how do we do that? I don't have actually a real solutions. I mean, you could give fake papers, but of course the people on my right will say it's not a good idea. But you can, in certain aspects, there are some ways that you can do. If you can go through a company name rather than your personal name, that could be a solution. There's not answer. There's no ready-made answer. Yes, there are some places you have to give a copy of your ID. Can you be a lawyer where you just don't care? You still have to show your ID. So it's part of, the reality. If you have questions, I actually invite you to come here. Actually, we're already late, and I think some of you need to take the train. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope to see you next year. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.